Test working. Now you get to hear my voice. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
We're trying to hit record on the Zoom. We're good? All right. Well, thank you all for coming tonight. And I think we have somebody actually on Zoom too. So actually out in the ether world. So tonight we are having a community meeting focused on the climate action strategies. And I want to thank you all for coming out and, having a talk with us. So we are going to have a lovely agenda, of course. So we're going to highlight why we're here. So we'll talk about a little bit about the climate emergency resolution. We're going to do a timeline of actions. That's going to be presented by Travis Wagner, our sustainability coordinator. We're also going to talk about the Sonoma's GHG emissions, our greenhouse gas emissions. And then we're going to have our chair of our Climate Action Commission, David Morrell, as well as our vice chair, Tom Conlon, talk about the climate strategy overview. And then I am going to close it up with next steps and then also opportunities to have conversation with you all, answer any questions that you have, and as well as answer or accept any comments that you want to have. I do, in case anybody has to leave early, I do want to just mention the actual climate action strategies are online, so you can read the whole lovely document that we've been working on and provide any comments that you have on the document to Travis and his email address, twagner@sonomacity.org. And you can find all that information, or if you have any questions, just email him or myself. I'm Jennifer Gates. Forgot to mention that, sorry. I'm the community development director, so I haven't seen some of your faces. So I'm the new girl in town. So I just started about 4 months ago. So just a little bit about myself. So since I haven't met a lot of you, so the community development department is a new department in the city, and it's a combination of planning and building now. So I think about 20, maybe 30 years ago, there used to be joined into one department, and then they were split into two different ones, and now we're back into one. So I am now the director of planning, building, and sustainability. So that's me, Jennifer Gates. So I'm happy to meet you all and willing to talk about any topics. You'll see my face because I hope to see all your faces again in November when we start talking about the general plan. Nodding heads, yes? Okay. So with that, I am going to have Travis come and kick off our presentation about why we're here today. All right, thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. It's great to see so many people out for this really important endeavor and plan that we're working on. So I'm just going to talk briefly about how to turn this on correctly. There we go. I'm just going to kind of go over this. This will be recorded, so you can go back and look at it. But just for some background, back in November 2020, the City Council passed a climate emergency resolution. This was a resolution that was developed by the Regional Climate Protection Authority. So all the jurisdictions in Sonoma County looked at this, and City Council adopted their version. And one of the key things is that it established a target of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. It also created the Joint Climate Action Subcommittee to draft the climate action plan. Whoops, did that skip one? Nope, okay. And this just gives you a sense of where we need to be. And I'm going to talk about that starting number very briefly in 2020. This is the greenhouse gas emissions for the community of Sonoma. So this is all residents, commercial, government, so forth and so on. And it's just over 78,000 metric ton equivalent of CO2. So it just takes all the greenhouse gases and puts them in this one metric that we can measure. So in order to get to net zero, this is a basic conceptual trend line that we need to follow, is the goal here. And I should say the target. So just some timeline of actions in April 2030. What the City Council did was they dissolved this Joint Climate Action Subcommittee, and they created the Climate Action Commission. This was in part, there used to be something called the Community Services Environment Commission. They also dissolved that and created the PROS, which is Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Committee. So they divided the two and had the Climate Action Commission focus on climate action and developing the plan that we're working, the draft version tonight. So in February, of this year, they had the initial meeting of the Climate Action Commission. And then from February through August, they met trying to identify what they viewed as the priority climate actions that they would recommend to the city council for their consideration. In just September, staff released the climate action strategy, which is the first part of developing the climate action plan, which will come later. But here's the strategy, here's a list of the climate actions, and that's what we have we're talking about tonight, and that's what's been posted on the website. And then tonight we're doing a public presentation, and we're trying to elicit your comments to incorporate into the climate strategies plan, and that public comment period will close in October. Jennifer will come up later on and talk about the next steps after we do this part. So I just want to talk briefly about the community greenhouse gas emissions. We've tracked them from 1990, there was a big gap, till 2010, and now we're doing the inventory more frequently. The city doesn't do it. It's done by the Regional Climate Protection Authority, which is the Sonoma County-wide agency. And the most recent data we have is from 2020. Now, you do see a significant decrease there, but we have to be very careful about that. That was in the middle of COVID. So there's certain degree of belief that this may be a little bit of a fluke. We will see when the next one comes out, and we're now scheduled for this coming spring. We'll have the 2022 emissions inventory, and that'll tell us where we're at and how much of a fluke that was. Hopefully it wasn't, but probably it was. This just shows you what's unique to Sonoma. The biggest driver in our greenhouse gas emissions, of course, is transportation, in part because the city is so reliant on the personal automobile. We don't have large shopping centers and so forth and so on. But that just tells you, and then number two is buildings. So think of heating, cooling, appliance usage, lighting, all that is what we put into buildings. We have solid waste is another source. And then water and wastewater is very small, but it's also important because if you conserve water, you can reduce that. So a lot of these have important co-benefits. And this just shows you very briefly, looking at the percent change, the biggest challenge from between 1990 and 2000, transportation is the biggest challenge. And again, the 2020 number is a little bit lower than we'd expect, especially for transportation, because people weren't driving around and they were shifting more to working at home. So we'll know in the spring where that trend line is. And the other really important aspect is you have to be careful about community-wide, because you have population changes. What this does is per capita. So we take all the emissions, divide it by the population, and we have the per capita. So that's a better marker of looking at how we're doing it individually. And it has been a steady decrease, which is very positive. And I think that's it. So that's all I have. I'm going to turn this over to David Morrell, the chair of the Climate Action Commission.
Thank you, Travis. I'm pleased to be here. I think we're going to deal just with this one strategy at this point. We're looking overall. Hard to look at the audience and up at the right screens. It is what it is. We basically have three phases as shown on this slide, where we're looking at the actions we need to get to our target of net zero by 2030. The word net becomes very important. Let's be sure we're all sort of following this along. There are emissions from cars, from homes, from using equipment like this. And then there are carbon sequestration, various types of activities that can place elemental carbon in the ground that can reduce emissions by a net zero. And so we're going to be looking at both in our plan. And the plan includes strategies to move us both with lower emissions, thanks for joining us, and for carbon sequestration of various kinds. Even planting trees over time can be an important component of carbon sequestration and moving us toward net zero, as well as adding more shade. We're looking at these preventive actions to address all of the impacts of climate change, and that's where all of us are involved. This is not an effort simply to define what the city will do. It's an effort to define what all of us will do, and our neighbors who are watching on the Zoom tonight rather than here in the room or otherwise involved in the process. It's the climate issue, I find, is one a lot of people get paralyzed into inaction. It seems so big, it's reliant on someone else, the other guy's solar system, the other guy's electric vehicle, the other guy's induction stove. It's really all of us in our own way. Each step, each day involves. And so those are the kinds of things the commission's trying to take into account as we look at how the city and the city's residents, most perhaps even all of us here tonight, will adapt and improve to deal with the climate hazards. So the next strategy, that looks like it's the same slide. No, I'm pushing the yeah, that's that one. There we go. That's third time is a charm. Some skills are better than others. This is not it. Basically, this is our overall planning process. It's a little hard to read, so I'm going to get closer to this particular screen. You've seen already some work we're doing in the inventory. If we're going to manage against the target, we need numbers. We need to understand the target and we need to know where we are. The second is to establish reduction targets against those data. Once we have the data at X, how do we make a number, a target that's below X in each of our different areas? You'll see we have 6 specific areas that we're looking at. The pink one's really hard to read. Identify actions to achieve the target. Kind of obvious. We have a target. Now, what actions are we going to take to achieve that target? And then adopting those actions. So we will be going to the city council for actions at the city level and for actions the city can take to encourage all of our residents and our businesses to take action. So one of the actions we're thinking about, for example, involves serious thinking about what does it mean to be a climate smart tourist destination. How do we work with our business community, with our environmental community, with our economic community in a climate smart technique? Those are some of the actions we'll be taking to achieve our targets. And then number 5, the purple box, becomes the really important one. Talk is easy, talk is cheap, including tonight. How do we do it? How do we actually take the actions needed to have more solar, to have more EV chargers, to have more water conservation across the board? What actions do we take at the city level and at the individual resident level and at the tourist level? How do we encourage our tourists to do better from the point of view of climate? Those are all implementing actions. And then, of course, number 6, evaluating progress. So the next point, am I still up on this one? What I don't have in front of me is who's doing what slides. Tom, you're doing this one? Oh, no, we have a plan. We got to implement the plan.
All right, well,
Here's this little button thing. I'll be back up later for more fun again.
yeah. Yeah, it is good to see everybody out tonight. So this is our overall plan. And so the 3 categories here, we've got the background. These are the things we've already kind of assembled largely, a process. The planning process has been initiated. The city has passed resolution, et cetera. So that's where we stand right now. We also have done inventories of both the community-wide emissions as well as the government emissions, that is the municipalities' emissions themselves. And those are 2 separate things, because if you think about it, the city can't tell you what to do at your own house, your own business, but the city can control how it spends its own money, what it invests in. And so we have a little more governmental control over governmental operations. And then finally, we're going to get into the next remaining slides, which is into the details of the recommended actions. So remember on that last, this slide here, number 3, that was the one we can't read. That was the action, I'm sorry, implementing the actions. We are at the stage of designing those actions. So that's box 3, the pink box we can't read, is the stage we're at tonight, which is identifying the actions. So we have a list. We have broken them into the categories of transportation, buildings, solid waste, water, government operations, and carbon sequestration. So I'm going to present the first 3, next 3 slides on the first topic, transportation, and then I'll do a couple of slides on buildings. Then David will come up and do solid waste and water. I'll come back and do government operations, and David will close out with the sequestration. So to come up with this draft list, we broke into ad hoc subcommittees of our Climate Action Commission. And we also looked at a lot of other resources. Each of the ad hocs looked at a lot of material that was available to us. Our transportation ad hoc referred to some of the state plans, some of the national research that's been done on what's really effective in transportation. The first one is really all about getting people out of their cars and taking up what's called active transportation, moving yourself around without a vehicle. It's not the only way to address emissions, but and transportation related emissions, but it's an important one. Specifically, we are proposing to update the city's master plan for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. Fortunately, the county is engaged in that right now, has about $1 million contract to do that throughout the county jurisdictions, and the city is piggybacking on that effort. So we're very pleased that that's underway and anticipate taking advantage of that here in the city limits. There's also efforts underway to connect the Sonoma City Bike Trail across town to the plaza, and to make that more walkable and more friendly and safe to use, that junction. The new city manager and Ms. Gates have both initiated the procurement of new bicycle racks for the plaza. That's been something you may have heard about. It's been percolating for many, many years. Under new leadership, we're actually, those are going to be installed soon if they haven't already been installed. So I think they've been ordered. I know they're on their way. And so downtown bicycle parking is a third important category. And then we're also looking at making our pedestrian trails more, less hot in the heat of the summer. And so putting in some trees along there is something we're going to look at as well. This next 2 categories have to do with the electrification of our vehicles. So our cars and our personal transportation. And that's specifically emphasizing EV charging at multi-unit dwellings where people have difficulty doing so. And then making EV charging stations more publicly accessible. So kind of like what we have gas stations, we need to have more plug-in stations as well. In the third category of improved public transportation, we're exploring the possibility of a downtown shuttle, a people mover of some kind. I've gotten some interesting input from the business community about that. Looking forward to more. And expanding the Sonoma Shuttle, which is a free service right now to hop on the bus. You can ride around Sonoma for free on the bus, to expand the service of that system. And then 2 ordinance-driven activities, one of which has a direct impact on reducing emissions, and the other which is not direct. Well, the one that's direct would be reduce idling T5, which is we would be banning new drive-through facilities. It's effectively, we've already got this in Sonoma, but this would just be making that quite official that you can't have a drive-through. I think we already have a prohibition on drive-through restaurants, but this would be prohibition on having a drive-through. Let's be creative here. Fred, you need manicure, pedicure, something like that. We wouldn't have drive-through manicure, pedicure here in Sonoma. And then the other one has to do with banning banning fossil fuel gas stations. The state has set a target of no longer selling fossil fuel vehicles after 2035, I believe it is. And so we have plenty of gas stations now. No one's waiting in line to get gas right now. We don't expect that many new gas vehicles to be sold. In fact, I heard the other day, what's the number? 16%? Is it higher than that? Maybe no, 26% of the new cars sold in California are EVs. Big change in the last year. So there's no reason to waste staff time processing new gas station or gas station expansion applications at the planning department, at the permit department. All right, switching over to buildings. So buildings is also an important sector. We have a lot of natural gas burned in our buildings right now. And so that's our top priority here, is to encourage increased electrification of our buildings. And the state has set a new construction ordinance that you can't build, incentivizing all electric construction in new buildings. And we would potentially adopt at the city level what's called a REACH code, going beyond the state minimum code to make that even more friendly. I just also heard that electric heat pumps for space heating are now over 50% market share of all new buildings built in California, permitted in California. So these changes are coming pretty fast. We're actually starting to make some improvements in these areas. We, in the category of increased community energy efficiency, we would be looking at the possibility of giveaway events where lighting efficiency technologies were encouraged. For anybody that still has old light bulbs, we make sure they know that they can get rid of those and put in better technology. And then more information in the category of efficiency workshops. Increase community energy efficiency, continuing on that theme, deploying local energy conservation teams. So a lot of times people don't know what to do. We would have some teams go out and work either through a local partner nonprofit or volunteers of some sort to help people figure out what they can do in their own buildings. And then building benchmarking. There is a benchmarking requirement for larger buildings in the state, but we don't have a lot of large buildings in Sonoma. So there are other ways to figure out how your building compares to your peers. You can do it through PG&E has a tool on the website. You can do it in other ways, and we would be promoting some of that here at the city level. And then obviously solar power is another way to address the building issue. And so we would be looking at increasing solar installations and exploring the feasibility of community microgrids. A microgrid is essentially putting your whole neighborhood, your whole group of buildings on a system that can be managing its power with respect to the grid. And that can oftentimes be very cost advantageous, and you can manage your emissions with that technology as well, especially if you put solar and batteries together inside your buildings. So David, I'm going to let you take over the solid waste items.
Thank you, Tom. As with all of these are the initial actions. We look forward to hearing from the public, both those of you who are here this evening, as well as those are following along on Zoom, and perhaps others subsequently being involved in this process, to be dealing with other actions that build upon these initial steps. For example, in the area Tom discussed in vehicles and transportation, there is a parking effort underway. It's not yet in our strategies, but there are efforts underway with the city and a lot of work going on in that area. So with respect to our fourth category of solid waste management, many of you, I think, are familiar that over the last couple of years, we've been doing a lot of new approaches to composting. It's a statewide effort called Senate Bill or SB 1383. Our colleague Travis has been very involved in this here in the city of Sonoma and more broadly countywide with Zero Waste Sonoma. A lot of success has been accomplished. So the issues that we're looking at here in the solid waste area for specific to greenhouse gas reduction, increased organic materials segregation, and we see a number of possibilities here to move even further than we have in the last couple of years on the SB 1383 process. Discounted residential backyard composters for some residences that may want to be doing their own compost management, not simply sending it off to the central zero waste system. We're looking at possibly providing incentives for some of that at backyard composters, which are increasingly available and reasonably clean, different than they used to be years ago in terms of attracting all sorts of small critters. They're much better than they used to be. Updating the solid waste franchise agreement. If there are questions tonight on that, I would turn to Dr. Wagner, who's going to know a lot more about that than I do from months of working with Zero Waste Sonoma and getting this all in place. But clearly there can be some efforts to improve that process. And then maybe waste practices at city facilities, at plaza events. We've already made some improvements in that regard in both plastics usage and paper usage, and we can move forward in that area as well. We want to decrease overall consumption of plastic, and plastic shopping bags are an important piece with a plastic bag ordinance potentially coming, and with enforcing the state requirements on fees for bags, plastic bags. So that's involved. Increasing the number of water bottle filling stations. This gets into water conservation, but also into just convenience of having water bottle filling stations available at plaza events and similar locations in order to lessen the use of plastic water bottles. So that's an important piece. Increasing the use of compliant food serviceware. The city's already moved with a number of actions and ordinances and requirements in this arena, and we want to go further, banning on disposable food serviceware. Let's recycle it. Let's move us in that direction. And basically, how can we make better use of all that compost to reduce carbon emissions? That's an overall theme in this general category of the solid waste category. In the area of water conservation, this is something that, of course, we've been interested in for years overall, both from a climate perspective and a broader environmental management perspective. Water usage is an important part of our overall electricity use. As we move water around, it takes a lot of electricity to do so. And we're interested. We've had a lot of success already, as you recall the early part of this evening's conversation. The water usage, greenhouse gases are already small. We want to just make them smaller. It's also, of course, water itself and water scarcity. Both groundwater and surface water issues are critical to our availability of water with the droughts and so on. So we want to reduce use of irrigation. We've had I used to call it the Cash for Grass program. I guess I'm supposed to be updated now. Grass has various meanings. It's now being called the Cash for Turf program. I have to train myself to call it that. And that's a very interesting one where, in fact, a friend of mine recently pulled his front yard grass and got some payment for that turf removal. So it's still there. Let's do more of it. Residential rain barrels, we're just very interested in the possibility of helping selected residences capture rainwater and use it for their own irrigation. And we want to find ways to provide city incentives to make that happen. Broader rainwater capture systems at government buildings. We're particularly focused initially on the city's corporation yard, which is actually in the county on A Street East. But it's city property. The initial look says that's the most efficient place to capture rainwater and use it. Their need for non-potable water, rainwater is non-potable water, is more critical there than it would be. Another target is this building. But we think the Corporation Yard A Street is a great place to start. There's a wonderful model for this already working not in the city, but nearby. It's called Flowery School up in the Springs, where a full-scale system has been designed and is operating successfully. So I would encourage you to go take a look at that up at the Flowery School as a model for us. And prepare and implement a community-based social marketing plan with respect to water usage. We're also interested in real-time monitoring. This involves various advanced metering infrastructure that can be installed. Basically, the overall theme, how can the city encourage all of our residents to use water more efficiently in their yards and in their homes? And rainwater capture can be a piece of that. Okay, Tom, I think you were going to talk about government ops, and then I'll finish up with carbon. I'll scoot around this side. We're all friends here. Hello, Fred. Oh, I gotta get this.
Pass the baton. Thanks. All right. So I'm going to quickly run through the categories and then come back to the details on the slide. So the first category in government operations, that's the municipal, what's within the control of the city, is our city buildings. So looking at energy conservation in the city buildings. We'd also be looking at replacing natural gas fired equipment in those same buildings. So that's number 4. The second one, and I'll let you take a picture of this in a second, is to upgrade and expand solar photovoltaics. And I think batteries are in there too in the city's facilities. And then the third category is the vehicles, the city's fleet of vehicles. And although the city has outsourced its police and fire services to other entities, to the county police sheriff's department, as well as to the fire district, we still buy the vehicles, or at least in case of fire, contribute to the cost of those vehicles from the city's budget. So those emissions for those vehicles fall onto the city's greenhouse gas inventory. So we have control of those purchase decisions, and we should be making sure that those are good investments for the city going forward. While I'm on that one, I'll just drill into it a little bit more. The city is in the process of developing a fleet electrification plan. So that, all the cars and trucks the city owns, figuring out which of the ones are most suitable for conversion to electric. Some of them are not, frankly, there aren't good electric alternatives yet available. Right? There's not a huge market for electric fire trucks yet. But there are some interesting opportunities in like street sweepers and certainly light duty vehicles like cars, and trucks are supposed to be hitting light duty, mid duty pickup trucks are going to be a lot more of those in the next couple of years. So that's something the city's actively looking at right now. And then making sure that there's adequate charging for city employees and for the charging of these new electric purchases. So that's something that we're going to be looking into under G3. Back to the buildings, natural gas. This is probably the biggest area to make big point gains in buildings, is to reduce dependence on natural gas. We're actually finding that gas emissions in buildings, or the amount of emissions attributable to gas, is much greater than just what's burned in the building, because the gas pipeline is so leaky, and gas manufacturing and fracking is so much escapes during that process. So that's probably the best place in buildings for us to concentrate right now. If I'm going backwards now to the first one, how do we know what to do in buildings? We need to do conservation audits. When we've done those, we found out, gee, we've got some window locks that don't work in the city hall building that need to be replaced, that will tighten the wind. You won't have a cold breeze blowing through in the wintertime. Cheap, easy to fix. Putting in vacancy lighting sensors so the lights don't get left on when the meeting room is empty. And then making sure that the heating and cooling systems in the city hall and the Carnegie Library are modern, functional HVAC systems. Now, back to this slide 2, upgrade and expand PV solar. The city has an array on this building, and this building. I've forgotten. I think there might be a second array someplace else, but it's is it on the corporate? It is on the corporation yard. Okay, good. I knew there was two. Travis is shaking his head because he's done a tremendous amount of great work looking at all of this stuff and having some consultants come in and do a preliminary kind of what we call cursory energy audits. And so having some more drilling down into the details of this, coming up with improvements to the solar system so that they work properly, that they maybe looking at batteries so that we can actually maximize their utility, because the way the PUC prices the the extra solar we generate in the middle of the day, we don't get a lot of benefit from that, as some of you may well know. So expanding PV on municipal buildings, and then yes, looking at parking canopies too. The city has a lot of parking space that's under its control. That's solar aperture that could be harvested. And so that's something we're going to be looking at through these reviews as well. And I think that pretty much covers my government ops slides, even though I didn't do them in order.
Thank you, Tom. We're going to wrap up here fairly soon. You go ahead. I'll swing around this side. What slide are we on now? We're still up on here. Yeah. Okay. The new slide is up. This is a critical area. It's one often not thought about in these processes. We all know we need to reduce emissions from our cars, from our houses, from our activities. But how do we deal with the fact that in 2030, we will not have emissions down to zero? What do we do to balance that out to get to net zero? Carbon sequestration becomes very important, and the Commission has identified a number of steps in this regard, and we anticipate more coming. We're looking at soil-based carbon sequestration, as you see under what we call C1. The application of compost has already been discussed in the area of solid waste management. The use of compost can be a way to sequester carbon and improved situation. We're also interested in elemental carbon usage called biochar. This has been a bit of a controversial topic within the Commission so far, and we encourage public commentary and thought on this as well. This is basically wood-based material produced in the absence of oxygen with heat that drives off the impurities, and you're left with essentially 100% elemental carbon that can sequester carbon in the ground. In addition, we're very interested as a commission and are coordinating closely with the Parks and Recreation Commission of the city in terms of planting trees in carbon sequestration category 2. We're particularly intrigued with a new concept called a green pocket forest. It's often given a Japanese name from a professor named Akiko Miyawaki, who developed this technique in Japan, where you use a range of native plants. These are not Japanese trees in Sonoma, but a Miyawaki forest could be rapidly growing, mixed type between shrubs and different kinds of trees, especially designed to sequester greenhouse gases quite rapidly. We've identified one city park already where there's a great deal of interest in moving forward on this. It's not yet official, but we are in conversations with the Parks and Rec Commission and with the Public Works Department. We visited this park. It's on the west side, called J.E. Carter Park. It's near Friar Creek, and that's been an interesting one. And once the concept is proved, there are several of these that have been built in the last several years in Berkeley that we have visited that look very attractive. We can look at this concept elsewhere, a densely structured green pocket forest. We're also interested possibly in Tree City USA designation and what that would require and how that stimulates, and in general, more green trees, and looking overall both on city properties and schoolyards and so on with greening efforts. And a carbon offset program, this is essentially looking, as we get closer to 2030, beginning to understand how the global carbon offset purchase program works, beginning to play in that marketplace. It's called CDR, carbon reduction credits. And there are various ways to do this, and we want to start learning to understand how that market works. So essentially, these are the 6 areas. I'm going to wrap up now with this thought. These are the 6 areas of action that the local commission has already adopted and is moving forward into climate strategies. We want to encourage you, as I said at the start this evening, we also encourage everyone to find his or her own ways to act as a climate steward, to be effective in this regard. Actions taken every day by each of us can help reduce our own greenhouse gas emissions and our own contributions to global warming. So with that, we're going to turn over to Jennifer to have public comment.
And next steps. All right. So next steps. So we're here tonight to take comments, questions, things like that. So thank you again for coming. We do have a few people on Zoom, so we'll manage that one as well. But first thing that I want to do is make sure that everybody knows where to find the document to look at all the details. So what we did is just provide you the highlights, but there's also a lot of information in there in regards to kind of what are the steps, what are the dates that we're looking to complete some of these items, which departments, who would be involved, also what kind of funding there is potentially for that. So there's a lot of information in the document, and Travis has written a lot about the GHG emissions and things like that. On your flyer that you have, it does provide you the actual web address for where you can find this, as well as Travis's email address. And so I really hope that you guys reach out to him. We are looking to finish up public comment on October 20th so that Travis and I can finalize the draft document and present it back to the Climate Action Commission at their November 8th meeting. So that's the next item that you see on there. So they still need to, as a commission, actually discuss the final draft and make a recommendation for City Council. Then we'll go to City Council with that draft document for their approval. We technically really can't move forward. These are policy, some of these are kind of policy type items. And so we need direction from City Council to move forward with some of these. And so that's the idea. Then we'll come back to the Climate Action Commission, create maybe some ad hoc committees and discuss what our priorities are and do budget requests for City Council to help fund some of these ideas. So there's still more steps to take. Some things we've already started or in the middle of, but the idea is to get a nice document for staff to say, okay, these are the things that we're doing. So that with that, I will start the public comment. I am going to take it from inside here first, and then we will go to Zoom. So if you could turn off the presentation. Thank you. Hi. Okay. All right. First question.
Comment. Can I make a comment?
Comment, question.
Can I stand up?
You can stand up, but please
Good.
speak in the mic so people on Zoom
I'm
can hear you.
familiar with that. So first of all, thank you all for the work you're doing and your, helping out and your service to the public here. So that's an important thing to do. My name is Michael Heffler. Thank you. Yeah. So why the thing that when David asked me actually to talk about the Evergreen program, the Sonoma Clean Power, but I came here from New Jersey about 2.5 years ago, and we fought a pipeline, and we beat them, went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the thing that I learned from doing that is just how absolutely dishonest the fossil fuel industry is and how they're going to continue to push to grow, not just to, slowly fall back. They're going to push to grow. I don't know if you saw Exxon just bought this giant fracking company for $60 billion to get more natural gas. When we were fighting that pipeline, the issue was that there were 5 natural gas companies in New Jersey. It was a capped market. There was no more growth available in New Jersey for natural gas. And so these guys lost their story to Wall Street about how their stock was going to grow. And so they found out that FERC, which is a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which was staffed primarily by fossil fuel consultants in the last administration, has a rule that anyone who builds a interstate pipeline gets a 14% guaranteed profit. All of a sudden, these people who had a cap market had a new story for Wall Street. Well, all this money was going to build this pipeline. And I sat in the meeting of one of those companies, New Jersey Natural Gas, and the CEO got up there and he showed this wonderful chart about how their stock had grown over the years and how great a job he had done. And then people made comments. So people who made comments were people whose homes and property were on the pipeline, saying how his people had trespassed on their property. And you know what he did? He called them liars. These are people like you and me who have property that, you know, natural gas could come right through. And I got up and I was a proxy for someone who was a stockholder. He said, I don't want you to read a proxy. And I said, good, because I wanted to ask you a question since you seem to be such an expert on who's a liar or not. We've got a cap market. We showed that chart of growth, which isn't going to happen anymore without this pipeline. We just called these people liars. And yet, we're standing here telling people you have this great growth opportunity that depends upon you trespassing in their property and creating a pipeline that's not needed. When you look at the next time, you can see a liar. We're not on a personal friend basis anymore. We're at that point. But the point is, these companies are going to keep pushing and keep making it possible for themselves to make those profits and spend $60 billion to buy more natural gas companies. We've got to do the little things that we can do, like buying induction stoves, buying heat pumps, getting an electric car, going from a gas dryer to a electric dryer, you know, little things, composting. I got a composter in my backyard, doesn't smell. Cats like it. So those things that we all can do, some of which are shown here. But the most important thing is if you do have kids or you have grandkids, this makes a difference to try to do these things. So thank you for your time. And I'm done.
Do we have any other questions or comments about what you guys heard tonight?
Well, I want to thank you all very much. I'm representing, and the four of us are representing the First Congregational Church Earth Care Committee. I'm Virginia Burleson, Kathy Jewell, Jane Wicklund, and Kim Pack. May I read what we would like to say? It's our gratitude really for what efforts you all have done. Thank you and the support, the CAC work in progress to define priority strategies for tackling climate change and global warming in our community. We give you thanks for all the work that you've done. Thank you.
Any questions, comments? All right.
I have a quick question. Hi, my name is Cedra. When I looked at the chart of where the most impacts were coming, 2/3 of it was coming from transportation. And then you went through all the different areas that you would like to strategize around, and which is fantastic. But it also had me wondering, there's areas that have that are critical, let's say, to have impact in and to have success in, that for me looked as if they would align with where the most global greenhouse gases are being emitted from. And I was wondering if there was any critical control points, let's say, around where the emissions are most are being emitted from in terms of transportation relative to the other areas. I agree that there's low-hanging fruit. There's areas that we can have lots of success around, but transportation looks to be a serious area. And so I wanted to know about how you are prioritizing, or if they're all equally important, or how's the strategy going to be put forward?
Yeah, a good question. And we've been discussing this internally in our commission meetings as well. So you're not asking about point source emissions from like refineries for gasoline, because we don't have those in the city limits, and those have been outside of our focus. But when we buy a gallon of gas at the gas station, it's not just the emissions from our own car or truck that are there. It's that whole supply chain that goes back to those point source emission sources. So yeah, the most important things we can do really are to drive less and buy less stuff that needs to be shipped to our house in Amazon or whatever those things that use emissions. So what we've presented to you tonight is based on an activities inventory, an activities greenhouse gas inventory. That is, what can we do in our day-to-day or city operations? And it doesn't refer so much to the secondary consumption emissions. So, for example, you know, if I grow an orange in my backyard, there's very little greenhouse gas emissions from doing that. But if I buy an orange that was shipped to me from Florida, there's a lot more. Brazil even further. So we're not looking at that sort of thing in our inventory. So with respect to transportation, I think we covered the big categories. So it is active transportation to not need to turn on the car in the first place, to get your shopping trips, to get your school trips, to get your work trips done without having to turn on a gas-powered vehicle. We then, for those times when you do need to use a vehicle, we recommend switching to electric.
So those numbers were within our city, though. That's
right.
That's right. That's right.
Right. So one of the things that we looked at is that Sonoma Valley, or the Sonoma City, actually, trips in and within and between Sonoma, city of Sonoma, we have more short duration trips than do other people around the county. We have one of the highest, I think we have the highest number of trips per capita. That's probably because our population is a little older, but also because we have a visitor population here, and those trips are recorded in the method that we use to count. But this is also one of the flattest, smallest, most walkable communities in the whole county. So we should be able, through that #1 recommendation, the active transportation approach, we should really be able to turn the curve on that. And that will be when we make it safer and more friendly and more socially acceptable to use a bicycle or to walk to your, to your Rotary meeting, to your kids' school, those kinds of things. And there's a side benefit, is you're actually happier when you get there. I noticed this when I was in Rotary, that I would, when I was driving, I would like get there. Oh, I can't find a place to park. And then
The whole city to
this, I have to go from, I have a long ride to go right from just north of the city limits to Freedman's. Is like, oh, it's a long bike ride. It's still very doable. And it's actually pretty safe because we've got a couple of excellent Class 1 bike paths from my house on out. But not everybody has that same bike path. And so that's what the first objective is to really look seriously at those pathways and to work with our neighbors to figure out where the opportunities are to make it easier for that to happen. Practically speaking, that probably means making bike lanes where there's currently parking spaces. Yeah. And in some of the neighborhoods, that might mean only having parking on one side of the street to have a safer route. What we've seen time and again all over the world is that when you do that, people actually like the neighborhood better when you make it more walkable. Property values go up, people feel safer, kids come out to play, the community cohesiveness is improved. Sonoma has tremendous opportunities in this area, and we really think we could lean into this, and that's what we're looking to do, both through the active transportation plan, but also in the general plan and circulation element to come.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for that question. It is a critical question. And I would simply note our commission is new, and this set of strategies is a first bite. We think over time, and with your community support, we look forward to being larger and more aggressive. We've raised issues already in the previous commission, and my previous chair is here, Mr. Fred Alabak, of events on the plaza. The city is sponsoring a lot of events on the plaza. What are their greenhouse gas emissions? I've noticed issues of tourism. We're very interested in parking strategies, and we're wondering what kind of signal we send on climate with free parking on the plaza. So these are all the issues we intend to come to as we begin to get organized and move forward. We're taking small bites at a very big apple, but you are right, it is the big apple.
We have another question.
Yes, well, I just wanted to make a comment, really. Yes, I am very interested in biochar. I am not a chemist and I'm not qualified, but I have had quite a bit of experience using biochar. And I know two people who you can go to, any of you naysayers can go to, who will swear on the Bible that biochar has enhanced their business enormously. One of them is up in Donham, the planter Donham, the vineyard that's within town here. The head plantsman there, he's called Jonathan, and he has been using it for many, many years, and it has increased his yield. He says it's been amazing. He actually has done blind testing where I think even now you can go and see some areas that have been done and some that have not. It is costly, and that's the reason the whole vineyard's not using it. But every year they're adding more, and he's having huge success. That's number one. Number two is up in Kendall Jackson. And my friend Tucker, who has the most beautiful European-looking kitchen garden there, huge acreage of food that he does primarily for Kendall Jackson, but now he's doing it for all the top restaurants in the city and all around here. And he's even known as a specialist to import seeds, unique seeds that have never been used in America before. And he's planting those and he's distributing those to top-end restaurants. He swears by biochar. His compost always has biochar. I took David to both these places, and we did get, I was very grateful to him. David rounded up a whole bunch of specialists in the subject, and we had a symposium up at Donham, which I think was very successful, wasn't it, David? And got the word around. I sort of got interested because I have grandchildren and I'm terrified by what's happening in our world. And so I've sort of been the biochar bitch. I called myself the biochar bitch. I ended up buying 1 ton of biochar because it's the only way you can buy it around here. There's nobody making biochar nearby except for this wonderful person. Where is he, David? He's way up north. And anyway, it's called Pacific Biochar. They make fabulous biochar, but you can only buy it in 1 ton loads. So I bought it with the ton. I had it imported to the garden on 7th Street. Cost me more money to get it delivered than it did to buy the biochar, which didn't please me. But and then I spent the next 6 months with my poor husband lugging bags of biochar up to the garden market so that we could sell it for $25 per bag. And we did. We got rid of it all. And then I thought, right, I can't go on doing this. Roger had a heart attack, probably because of the biochar. I am not capable of lifting these things into people's cars. So I set up a sort of, I hope, an ongoing program there. I bought 2 huge, enormous bins full of biochar. And the deal was that they would sell it at the market. They would then keep the money from the sale and they would reorder when necessary. And I sort of backed out at that point because it was many of the same people coming through each week. And I was becoming a bit of an annoyance to them, I'm sure, constantly going on about biochar. But the good news is that all the people with plots there are now using it. And they keep coming to me and thanking me and saying, my yield is so much better. My plants are so much healthier. I don't have bugs like I used to. So there is some mystery about biochar. I know there are the naysayers. I'm on the internet a lot. I've read all the good things. I've read all the bad things. I'm not a scientist and I can't comment, but I do know India has been using it for generation after generation after generation in their planting because of its ability to absorb water. They're quite apart from all the other things with the microbes and the fact that it sequesters carbon. For water alone, it's important to use in Sonoma. That's my piece. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your inputs on biochar.
Hi, my name's Mandy Massarelli, and I wanted to ask about, I live in a condo, so I represent the multi-unit people dwellers. And me and a neighbor are very frustrated with how difficult it is for us to buy and charge an electric car. I'd like to buy a used electric car. So we're going to try to go in on this, putting in the 30 amp thing on my panel, tunneling under 75 feet to my parking place and trying to share it. It's, almost $3,000. And then on top of that, we have the city of Sonoma with their permit, extremely difficult. We have all these extra hours for the electrician to deal with. I think there should just be a button on the website. I should be able to fill it out and save my electrician some time. And it shouldn't be so difficult. They shouldn't be standing in our way. And so I think, you talked about putting the commercial one into these multi-unit places. How fast can that happen? Is that years away? Because none of us can buy electric cars till that happens. There's not enough charging places downtown. No one's going to sit in their car for 4 hours waiting for their car to charge. So this is something that needs to be a priority, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for that input. It's definitely something that's on our radar. I know.
And then there's also the composting. I think a lot of apartments and, places, condo units, they're not really encouraging composting. We weren't given the little containers that go next to your sink. The landlords don't really care. They're not putting out the green bins. There's no follow-up with the multi-unit dwellings to really encourage composting.
Yeah. So the multifamily charging is a top priority policy interest at the state level. And we are also doing what we can here at the local level. It's expensive. So it's not something that the city has tremendous financial resources to help with. But I believe there is significant funding now coming through the federal stimulus money, the IRA and the IIJA. And I'm not completely up to date on how that money is going to be coming to Sonoma to help you in your complex, but we're going to do what we can to pull that money into the city. And it's one of our things that's on the list there is. Now, but that's a specific recommendation we haven't heard before. So we're going to take note of that and talk about that. And there may be ways to streamline it too, so that both the city's objectives are met and your needs are met as well. We don't want to add costs for these kinds of things. We can avoid it.
Yeah, we just streamlined the solar installation for single family. But I mean, that's something that we can look at and see what is going on and if there's ways that we can create, if you do it the way that we are suggesting, hence we've already looked at the installation, how it's installed, you would just be paying for the inspection because we need to make sure it was installed correctly.
Jennifer, part of my background professionally is in simplified environmental permitting. So I'm going to take this on and see what I can do to recommend we get something like that here in the city of Sonoma.
Do we have any more bins?
Just email me. I will deliver as many of the kitchen pails that you want.
Yes, I was going to say,
We got.
I bought mine on Amazon, but I know. I said Amazon, but I didn't know where else to go. We had this one, and then bread.
Hi, my name is Jane Wicklin, and first I just really want to thank, I'm just feel so grateful that the City of Sonoma is doing this. I'm so grateful that you are spending your time and energy on this, and I think it's so important. It's one of the most important things for us to be working on. A couple of things that came up while I was listening to the presentation, and I know there's a lot of talk about bicycle paths and increasing people being and walking paths. And I applaud that. I genuinely do. My husband and I do a lot of walking around the city. And we like doing that. But I have to be honest, when we go to do our errands, we're in the car. And that's because of what we're going to be having to be carrying home. Like going to the farmer's market tomorrow, we will probably drive because of everything that we buy at the farmer's market, which is considerable every week. So it'd be really nice if you mentioned something about a shuttle, and I really am not aware of the Sonoma shuttle. I would like to know more about it, and would really like to know if we could have more shuttles so that people could, I could walk to the market and then take a shuttle home with all my goods, or I could walk to Friedman's and then come back with my paint cans or whatever I'm buying at Friedman's. The other thing that kind of popped out for me is I live near the schools, and there's so many parents driving their kids to school. That's the main way that kids get to school now. And if we could have electric buses for these kids, it would save the parents a lot of time who have jobs to get to. And it would be better for the city, for the environment. I think it's good for the community. It's good for the kids. So that was another thing I just thought of. And something else, there is a dark sky movement that is nationwide and maybe worldwide. And I was wondering if you've looked into that at all, as far as reducing streetlights. I know the high school with their new field, they have their field lights on every single night of the week to really late when nobody's out in the field. And I know they have solar, so maybe it's not costing them anything. And that's just one example. But I think it's something else to consider. Anyways, and again, I just very grateful and appreciate all that you're doing.
My name is Kim Pack, and I also want to thank you all for the work that you're doing on this commission. I really appreciate the slide presentation and agree with all the things that you have presented. One thing you mentioned the cash to turf incentive, and I live in an HOA, and it didn't apply to us. And it seems like there's a lot of HOAs with lawns, and it would be really beneficial if they could be included, because they are it is a residential community. And the Green Pocket Forest, I was very interested in, and whether that was something that would be looked at not just for government property, but for, private nonprofit property that, has area to plant a dense green forest. We would love it.
Thank you very much. The HOA operation will look at that with respect to the cash for turf and see how that might work. And that's an excellent idea with respect to the use of Green Pocket Forest throughout the system. We want to do proof of concept. The two in Berkeley are at schools, and going from there to community property. We're looking at possible moving beyond some of the parks into Montini, Sonoma Overlook Trail, some of those areas, Sonoma Garden Park on 7th Street East, various areas like that, and then into private dwellings, some of the larger homes. We might induce homeowners in larger lots to do this. These can also be quite small. We're particularly interested in some linear dense pocket forests that don't have to be square, but can be linear and might work elsewhere. Once we get proof of concept and we make sure that this thing really works, and we understand the irrigation and the maintenance side, there are some concerns about visibility. If you have a sizable square shaped pocket forest, is somebody going to hide in there who's unhoused? Is somebody going to hide in there and smoke things that aren't legal? These are some of the issues that are coming up, and we're dealing with this across the board. But I assure you we'll be looking more at all of this going forward, and thank you.
I wanted to address both Jane and Kim's comments. So I want to be sure I understand the HOA comment, because it's a lot of times it's the HOA that has the decision. I don't think the city prohibits an HOA from participating, or is that the case? Do you know what the answer to that is?
I can tell you my experience, but it was with this was Valley of the Moon Water District. And I live in Temelec. So just outside the city of Sonoma. But they came out and they actually measured the lawns we were going to convert because he wasn't sure. And then he came back and said, no, that HOAs are considered commercial and not residential. And it was only for residential property.
Okay, so that is not the city jurisdiction question. That's a Valley of the Moon jurisdiction question. That said, it sounds to me like Temelec converting their grass their turf would probably be a big hit to the budget for that program. Temelec has so much grass. So I would go to the Valley of the Moon board meetings and talk to them about your intent to do something out there. They really should be willing to work with you, because a lot less water if you do so.
Thank you.
Then on Jane's comments, I mean, good questions, Jane. And in terms of how to get your groceries back from the daily trips, we all have stuff we have to carry. I go to the Freedman's and I got 8-foot thing sticking off the back of my bicycle. It's not the safest way to go. I can do it, but I'm crazy that way. There are new technologies, bicycle, cargo bikes, and e-bikes, and other ways to get around that are less greenhouse gas intensive than driving the car for those little trips around town. You're identifying the shuttle as an option is a really good idea. There are paratransit options that are available to us. I don't know how many people who need those paratransit options are taking full advantage of them here in the Valley. I don't get the sense that there's as much use of paratransit here in the Valley as there is in other parts of the county. Paratransit is for folks that have mobility difficulties and need an additional source or an additional method of getting around besides just the usual bus or the usual car. So I think it's the 32 shuttle, the 32 route of the Sonoma County Transit is the local city shuttle. And it's a hop on, hop off for if your ride is within just the local area. I think it does go to Temelec. And so it would be a way to get into the plaza and back out, provided that you can work your schedule around the current limitations of the schedule. There's a great recognition that this is a need all over the state. So additional funding of county transit is happening. It's going to take time, but we're going to get continuously, I believe, get more routes, more funding of public transportation. So hang in there.
We are going to be looking at doing a citywide shuttle. I mean, it's years in the making, but it is something that we identified in our parking management plan. I'm going to let Fred go next. And then if you are on Zoom and you have questions or comments, please raise your hand so that I know, and I will call on you after Fred.
Thank you. I'd just like to express my admiration to David and Tom for sticking with it through all these years. and it's taken tremendous patience and grace to stay in and have the energy to do what you guys are doing. So thank you guys for staying with it. And I'm persuaded by the seriousness of the climate issue and the human caused climate change. And it's a serious issue, and I think this is a good plan to address it. And so my comments are in no way to, say anything against the good work that you guys are doing. And I support this plan. I think it's a great plan, and so really good work. I'd like to point out that the city has valley-wide collaboration with the swimming pool, the chamber, the homeless plan, the Sonoma Valley Visitors Bureau, top tier nonprofits, tourism improvement district. And so I think that the city should have a environmental justice as a valley level too, which would expand beyond the city's borders and not proscribe this climate plan to just the city, because the city has set a precedent for having valley-wide interaction with the valley. And so the county environmental justice element has identified an EJ community in the city sphere on the south side, and also another possibly EJ community in the Springs. And then Temelec is definitely a disadvantaged unincorporated community. So I think that the city has in effect externalized its environmental justice issues to outside its borders. Let's see. So I don't think that that's then makes it so that the city shouldn't have to deal with that. So like the city does deal with other things in the valley. So I'm wondering, what would be the consequences for low income people in the valley of some of these climate measures in terms of personal cost to them, and whether there could maybe be some government help if there's, particular things that would cost a lot more, like the EV or electrification, somehow, some help for people. And so one of the recommendations in the draft county environmental justice element is that park and rec opportunities would be shared more for environmental justice communities. And so I know that the city is looking at park and rec more seriously. So I think that one recommendation would be that city park and rec dollars could be shared to the Springs and the west side first, so that it would go to the areas where people need it the most. And then I'd also suggest that the city in its general plan do an environmental justice element, or at least address those issues in some other part of the general plan. One thing that I have a concern about is I've studied game theory a little bit and the prisoner's dilemma. And so there's a thing called the sucker's payoff. That's when you are conserving, but then you see all these other people who aren't. And so then it kind of destroys your incentive to do it. So I used to live in Tucson, and I would save water religiously, but then I looked around and there was golf courses and green lawns everywhere. So I thought, man, what a sucker. You're saving all this water for these other people's green grass. So I think that there ought to be some way to penalize people who are cheating on items that everyone should be working on together. So in that regard, perhaps, and I happen to the wind just kind of blew me to living on the east side. So whenever I go anywhere, I have to go through lots of luxury remodels and things. And so a lot of those are in the city. So I think that the city could maybe find a way to penalize extraneous luxury remodels to an already good house. Doesn't need to have all of a sudden be retrofit with copper gutters, copper fenced, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe the city could find a way to monetize and tax luxury remodels to fund climate change mitigations. Let's see. And then for electrical vehicles, it is an issue if you're a renter to try to find a place to charge it. And also, I just looked into this a little bit, and I saw that California has very high electric rates, and people who I work with were complaining that their electric bills were just astronomical. And so I'm not sure how that's going to work for people getting electric things and then having the bill just be through the roof. But I do remember Travis saying that transportation is the big ticket item, and so we pretty much have to wait for the industry to it'll come at like a watershed event, and it's not gonna that graph that Travis showed. I think it will get a lot better at some point when people can all of a sudden get electric vehicles and it's easier. Let's see here. See, and then as far as shopping, one thing that I've been saying for years is that people who have low income can't afford to shop in Sonoma Valley, period. Even Safeway is quite a bit more expensive. So my family shops at Grocery Outlet, where we can get the exact same items as Whole Food and Sonoma Market and Safeway for 5 times less the price. So I think that Sonoma could get a Grocery Outlet, and then that would save a tremendous amount of traffic out of the valley if people could buy affordable food here and not have to go out of valley. That would be a big one right there. And then with the e-bikes, this is just an extraneous comment. It seems like a Jevons paradox that all of a sudden everyone's getting e-bikes. And what about all the GHG costs to make all those e-bikes because they're too lazy to pedal and you already got a bike? So it seems like the e-bikes are kind of a problem. And then I wanted to just make one comment. Tom mentioned about the drive-throughs, and I went in my past to help rebuild an arson-burned church in Texas. And so I stopped at a bank on the way in Texas, and they had just closed. And the woman said, "You got to go to the draft room." And I said, "What? You got to go to the draft room?" I said, "The draft room?" She said, "No, the drive-through." Those are my comments. Thanks.
Well, I don't know how to respond to the last one, but I would first, for those who don't know, I want to thank Fred Alabak for his prior role as the chair of the Joint Climate Action Committee, on which I helped to serve with Fred, and I've always learned a lot from Fred. A number of notes, Fred, as I responded to your many interesting comments. In the early phases of our work, we were concerned about environmental justice within the city limits, and we reached out with a colleague, Michael Heffler, who was here earlier this evening. Michael took the lead in reaching out for solar PV options at this mobile home park here in the city limits. And it turned out, after a good deal of analytics, that the weight of the systems can't be supported by the mobile homes. So it's challenging to deal with these issues, but rest assured we are at least looking and trying to find ways to address EJ issues within the city. We're interested in the possibility, and the commission looked at and hasn't yet fully adopted, looking at water meters and identifying whether there was a water ad hoc committee formed earlier on. And one of our draft options that didn't get adopted yet was to track the highest use water folks and start out by sending them nasty letters and potentially over time considering fiscal penalties for high water use. So that is a bit on the agenda potentially coming up.
The San Juan Capistrano ruling makes it so you can't penalize them like that. That's too bad. That's at least we didn't spend more time chasing that rabbit. We're interested in the West Side, and you mentioned the first proposal at the moment for the Green Pocket Forest is on the West Side. So we're aware of the needs to focus across the board, but particularly on the West Side. And there were issues. Those who purchase EVs or lease them, and you were worried about electric rates, there are time of use rates available that can be
quite attractive if you're careful about when you charge and when you don't charge. Tom, you had some comments as well on Fred's many issues.
I'll be brief. I just, I'm interested in hearing more about your disadvantaged communities, jurisdictional questions. I'd like to understand that a little bit better. I don't have a clear grasp of it right now, but it does seem worth thinking about it, particularly as we enter into the general planning process. And I'll just push back a little bit, I think, on the e-bikes. While I know that the way e-bikes were implemented, I read a report, I think it was issued by Lawrence Berkeley Labs or somebody like that, that looked at the total life cycle cost of these bikes that you see dropped off on the city streets and in the more urban centers. We don't have them here in Sonoma, but the e-bikes, they were being used lightly but very aggressively. And they were used infrequently but very aggressively, and so they were not lasting. And then you had people driving around in trucks picking them up and bringing them in to be recharged because they weren't placed where they needed to be recharged. And the total life cycle cost was actually higher because they kept throwing them away and putting brand new ones with new batteries in them. They were not actually having a very good impact. However, that's not true of all the e-bikes. If you buy one because you're getting older and you would otherwise be driving around as an SUV, you may find there's a dramatic impact of not doing so. So it all depends on what your comparison is, I think. And we should all be thinking about our purchase decisions to say, wow, what can I do? City's doing that now with its own purchase decisions. We can all look at that a little bit.
All right. So are there any more questions in the audience itself? I do not see any hands on Zoom. So I'm okay. Just all right, just making sure there's nobody on Zoom still.
I haven't looked into this a lot, but I would like a way to get to Santa Rosa, Petaluma, Marin County. And there's a SMART train, but I feel like we're isolated from it. How good a transportation can we get to that train so that people don't have to drive to those places?
Well, that's a good question. And the new SMART director is interested in making that, answering that question for you so that you will be enthusiastic about supporting the extension of the sales tax, which underwrites the SMART train. And it's true because Sonoma has been paying that tax for quite some time, and we don't have the train, and we don't really have any way to get to the train very easily. The SMART has been investing in a pilot project up at the airport to get people from the train terminus, the train station, to the airport loading area, to the terminal. Apparently that's working out. I think actually I shouldn't speak. I haven't looked at the data. So there are some ideas afoot to have some of these little shuttles, these last mile, they call them transportation solutions. There used to be a bus between here and Napa. Ridership was so low they canceled it. There used to be more service to Petaluma than there is now. There is a bus to Petaluma. I've taken it. It's great. You're oftentimes the only person on the bus. It's a big full-size bus. County's working on optimizing those services. I expect that will get better over the next couple of years as well. Let's see, the other place you said was to Santa Rosa, and we did just add through the climate funds that the County Board of Supervisors administers, they granted enough money for the county transit to add an express bus to Santa Rosa in the morning. And that's the service that has been surprisingly well used. I heard Brian Albee from the Transportation Office, County Transportation Authority, say that he was personally surprised that ridership was as high as it was in response to that investment. So there's demand for these services. And it is difficult for people to find out that they're there, you know. If you add the line, you don't necessarily know to go look, but keep your eyes open. There's going to be a lot of new opportunities coming.
I have a final question for Tom and Travis. When I was involved in this, I felt like that if Sonoma did its fair share, you know, we did our proportional fair share, then we would be demonstrating, you know, what everyone else should do. And it seems like that the city and you guys are really making a really solid effort here, and that Sonoma likely is doing its fair share here. What do you see as the prognosis for human caused climate change for a lot of people who aren't doing their fair share? Like, where are we going to get to with the temperatures and things? What's your forecast?
Well, you mentioned the prisoner's dilemma, Fred. We are all in this together, and you know, Sonoma has not had. We've had a series of city managers. We've had changing city council. We really haven't had leadership since the climate emergency resolution was passed until our new city manager was hired. And so, and the new council came in to do that. So we have a team that's coalescing here in the Sonoma. I think the fair share is about to really spike. I'm very enthusiastic about what's happening now in the city with the public works, Jennifer's offices, merged offices, and Travis's continuing support of all of this. So I'm optimistic about where we're headed at the city level, but to the bigger question, it's far beyond our ability to. We can do our part here, but we can't move the whole planet from here. But we should at least try to be ahead of the curve. And that's what the goal, that's what the targets are. The targets are more aggressive than the state's targets. The state's targets are more aggressive than many other states in the country. And this country is making more progress than a lot of other countries are, arguably. So it's a big challenge. But nothing like having the reality of the impacts of climate change just getting more dramatically available and noticeable all the time.
Notice, I think it was 2 days ago, read the article about the Pope. Did you read the Pope's message? We got the Pope on board. Yeah, I was thrilled to do that. I mean, I didn't know Vatican could be political, but he's made a big stand. So that hopefully will send some messages somewhere.
Yes, thank you. I just want to go back and talk about transportation just a little bit, and then connect that to the climate plan, the climate strategy plan. So yes, the vast majority of greenhouse gases are from transportation. And so to contextualize this, you know, if you haven't, you know, please take the time to review the plan itself. Because the first part is there's a number of federal and state actions that are happening that really are going to fundamentally change emissions in the city. And that's through technology, but also EV charging. And certainly the biggest, and so what we are looking at in the plan is, well, what are the barriers for one, EV charging, but also what are the barriers for not using a vehicle? And so it's a holistic plan of identifying and trying to address the barriers, but also trying to figure out how we can improve access to charging. And this isn't something unique to Sonoma. It's not just multi-unit families, it's renters, because the landlord might not be interested in putting in EV charging, even though the renter might. This is what we call a split incentive. It's also not everyone has a garage or has they might have off-street parking. How do you get charging to that? And this is something that jurisdictions around the country are looking at about, for example, you can switch light poles into charging, trying to get charging hubs. There's all these things that we're looking at. And part of that is driven by technology and policy at the federal and state level. And there's such demand for it. I think most people would agree we've reached that inflection point where we're going to really start seeing EV ownership and EV charging taking off the next 3 or 4 years, as long as they settle the labor strike, hopefully. But we're all there. But also we're looking at in the plan is what are the barriers? How can we improve walking, people-powered transportation, also public transportation. So it's a whole package of things of proposed action. So if you do have the chance, strongly recommend you look at these because there's a lot more detail than was presented tonight. And if you have comments, questions, or concerns, suggestions, please send me an email at twagner@sonomacity.org. And also, if you want kitchen pails, send them to me. Send that to me, and I'll make sure you get them. Thank you.
His email address again is on that flyer. So send your emails. Yes, that one. So we have slotted 15 minutes, but if there's nobody else, I'll conclude with a plea. So any other last questions, comments? Okay, my plea. So Climate Action Strategies is a document. It is one document that we have identified, as we talked about tonight, some actions and strategies that we are looking for city council's blessing basically on early next year. That being said, we're in the middle of a lot of big projects going on. And so your continued participation in all of these activities is very important. And the reason why is, one, we're doing an active transportation plan. Well, the county's doing it, but we are participating. So look for information about that. So active transportation is the walking and the biking routes throughout the whole county, but that includes us. And so how do we connect in those ways throughout the county? The other item is our general plan. We kicked it off last night with a joint planning commission and city council meeting. If you haven't already, it should be going out this week, I think. You'll be getting a postcard from us that talks about the general plan kickoff and where to go to find more information. But those meetings are coming up in November. So it'll be November 2nd and November 13th are the 2 meeting dates at the Vintage House at 6 o'clock. Those are what we're going to call visioning workshops. That's where we're going to start talking about what your vision is for the city. And we're looking in 20 years, but things will happen between now and 20 years. So what do we want to see our city become? This is where Fred was talking about environmental justice. That's one of many topics that could potentially be discussed or talked about. So we're going to focus more on our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities. How do we envision ourselves into the future? And there's going to be activities around that to get everybody's information and input. We are looking at elements that include climate change, which is the link to this document here. We are going to take what the general plan talks about around circulation, land use, the climate change, environmental justice, lots of different topics feed into a future climate action plan. So right now we're doing what we call some intermittent steps, things that we can do right now within the next couple of years. Then we're going to have a general plan, and it's going to set the big policy for the whole city. And then that feeds into a climate action plan and other types of plans. That's why I'm really, really asking that you participate at that level as well with the general plan process. Tell your friends about it. I also, I'm very interested in presenting to individuals where they are at. So if you have groups that you're a member of, HOAs, your church group, things like that, we can do presentations for you all, get your input from those opportunities as well. We'll be doing what we call our visioning probably through January. So I'm looking to start calendaring meetings and things through this winter. So that is what is going on. If you have more questions, let me know. My email address is jgates, Gates, @sonomacity.org. So I think with that, I want to thank you again for coming out and hope to see you again in November. So this meeting is November 8th. The Climate Action Commission will discuss the climate action strategies and make a recommendation that night. And then You can come the November 13th or November 2nd. So I hope to see you all. All right. Thank you.